On BBC One now, the early evening news with Andrew Harvey.
Relatives of one of the nurses charged with murder in Saudi Arabia say they'll fight to establish her innocence. Her family's told a news conference she's not capable of hurting anybody. More than 40 buses have been damaged in an attack by vandals. And England's cricketers still on the receiving end in Harare.
Very deft shot from...
Good evening. The family of one of the British nurses accused of murdering a colleague in Saudi Arabia have spoken of their fight to establish her innocence. Relatives of Lucy McLaughlin say they're in constant touch with the Foreign Office and they expect a preliminary hearing of the case within days. Miss McLaughlin from Dundee and Deborah Parry from the Midlands could face the death penalty if they're found guilty of murdering an Australian nurse, Yvonne Guilford.
Lucy McLaughlin's parents and her brother insisted today that she was innocent of murder. Her mother and father were too distressed to speak at a news conference in Dundee for a week at a police station near the military hospital in Dhahran where she worked. She and another nurse, Deborah Parry, have been charged with murdering 55-year-old Yvonne Guilford, who was stabbed, hit with a hammer and asphyxiated. It could be many months before the matter is tried in a Saudi court, and British lawyers believe independent observers should be present.
There is room for doubt in the case of Saudi Arabia because it does have a record of pretty harsh treatment of political opponents. Now, these women, of course, are not political opponents of the regime, but where there is any reason for concern or doubt, it's always a good thing to have international observers who can simply go and observe and just report on what happens.
A Saudi-owned daily newspaper based in London has reported that the nurses have confessed to the killing. It says if their plea of manslaughter is accepted, they're likely to escape a public beheading.
If it is a premeditated killing, then they would have to face a capital punishment. If it is manslaughter, I think it is different, and it would depend on what the family of the victim would, if they press charges or not. And if they don't press charges, I think it would be, a sentence, a prison sentence, not more than that.
Tonight, the Foreign Office described newspaper claims of a confession as speculation. Consular officials in Saudi Arabia are expected to visit the two accused nurses once again over the weekend. Paul Newman, BBC News at the Foreign Office.
Vandals have caused nearly £1 million worth of damage to a fleet of buses in Bolton. More than 40 vehicles were wrecked over the Christmas period at two depots in the town.
When Stagecoach Ribble opened their Bolton bus depot this morning, it looked more like a scrapyard. Police believe that either on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, when all the buses were off the road, two vehicles were started up in the depot and used as battering rams to systematically damage each of the 38 buses. In a second attack, all the windows were broken of another 6 Stagecoach buses parked at a nearby site. At least 12 of the buses have been written off. The other 32 need repairing, so the final bill could be close to £1 million. Since the privatisation of bus services, competition has become intense, and a number of firms have been put out of business. But whether these attacks were motivated by revenge or just mindless acts of vandalism remains unclear.
We are obviously working with the police, and any help we can give them to apprehend who was involved in this, then we will do just that.
Despite losing half its fleet, Stagecoach Ribble is determined to keep its local bus service going. Katrina Lewis, BBC News, Bolton.
Police and bailiffs have evicted anti-road protesters from one of 3 camps along the route of the A30 near Exeter. Opponents of a £65 million road improvement scheme have been living in trees and tunnels of the site at Alacombe for the past 2 years.
The road protesters at Alacombe spent more than 2 years building their defences against the A30 improvement scheme. It took contractors just minutes to tear them down after bailiffs and police mounted a surprise operation at daybreak. Only 5 protesters were found on the site, but they were all asleep after the Christmas festivities.
We're not really that surprised, really. It's the ideal time to do it, isn't it? Loads of people are home visiting their families, and, everything was really quiet, and, and they could just, nip in early in the morning and do it.
A network of tunnels which had been built at the Alacombe site were destroyed to stop demonstrators trying to get underground. Protesters were also criticised for not taking care of the camp and leaving it like a waste dump. Bailiffs still have 2 more camps to clear, but they've now lost the element of surprise, and it's recognised that the operation will require more manpower because the sites are bigger and better prepared.
Yeah, we won't have any problem with them. It'll take us longer though, but I've got specialist contractors who are first class at climbing trees and going down tunnels and everything else.
The protesters claim the road will destroy ancient trees as well as damage the beauty of the Devon countryside, but many local residents support the scheme. Stephen Cape, BBC News, Devon.
Buckingham Palace has complained to the Advertising Standards Authority about an advert that features an image of Diana, Princess of Wales. The advertisement for a satirical magazine shows Diana wearing leather clothes and carrying a whip. The palace says permission must be sought for any image of a member of the royal family to be used in an advertisement. The princess is currently on holiday on the Caribbean island of Barbuda. The winter sales have begun, with bargain hunters expected to spend several £billion over the next few days. Snow kept the traditional queues away from Oxford Street in London, with only a handful of shoppers around at opening time. At Metroland in Newcastle, security staff had to control the crowds. Throughout southern England, the snow brought some fun and some traffic problems, but few serious accidents. A British yachtsman competing in a single-handed round-the-world race has rescued another competitor in heavy seas more than 1,000 miles south of Perth in Australia. Pete Goss picked up the French sailor after his yacht had begun to sink.
A tiny speck in the ocean, Raphael Dinelli could only wave frantically for help as he stood on the upturned hull of his yacht, the vessel slowly sinking into the freezing water. Dinelli sent up a distress beacon after fierce waves had crippled the yacht more than 1,000 miles south of Western Australia. An Australian Air Force team finally spotted him after an 18-hour search. They dropped a raft, radio and food, but it was fellow round-the-world yachtsman Pete Goss who eventually brought him to safety. Guided by an Air Force rescue team, Goss sailed through the night to find Dinelli.
He was standing up at the doorway of the life raft and waving as we went past, so he really was very lucky because I suppose it was just luck that the rescue yacht happened to be so close.
Goss, seen here preparing for the race, has faxed officials saying his competitor Dinelli is suffering from mild hypothermia but is otherwise unharmed. The 2 men are now heading to Hobart in Tasmania so Goss can continue competing in the race. The original field has been whittled down from 14 to 10 yachts. Officials say Goss will be compensated for the time spent saving Dinelli, who, they claim, wasn't supposed to be in the competition. He'd been barred before the start for being too inexperienced. He decided to chance it anyway, a gamble which clearly didn't pay off. Jackie Long, BBC News.
Diplomatic efforts are continuing to try to end the siege at the Japanese ambassador's residence in Peru. The Red Cross has once again been delivering food and water to the guerrillas and their 103 hostages, who've now been held in the residence for 10 days. International observers investigating the local elections in Serbia have backed claims that opposition parties did win several disputed contests. They've called on Serbia's President Milosevic to accept their findings. The original decision by the Serbian courts to annul the opposition's victories has been followed by 5 weeks of protests.
Opposition supporters were jubilant as the OSCE's verdict was announced over loudspeakers in Belgrade. They cheered the news and jeered the hundreds of riot police surrounding them. But the security forces are taking a new, harder line. Student protesters were stopped from marching and confined to the city's pedestrian precinct, where they showed their contempt for the new policy. President Milosevic, they say, has made a prison of his capital. The Serbian leader has 1 week to respond to the OSCE report. It was President Milosevic who invited the OSCE team to Serbia, saying they would verify that everything had been done properly in the local elections. But all the signs are now that he will reject the OSCE's findings. His officials say the OSCE's recommendations are non-binding and the municipal elections are an internal matter. President Milosevic himself has vowed that Serbia will not be ruled by a foreign hand. The anti-government protesters know the Serbian leader has made a tactical blunder, and one which will increase the international pressure on him to back down. But with Belgrade swamped by riot police, it seems President Milosevic is no longer listening to condemnation from abroad. Paul Wood, BBC News, Belgrade.
Many motorcyclists are angry about a new law that could force them off the road. From New Year's Day, it'll be illegal to ride a moped or motorcycle without completing a compulsory training course. But the Motorcycle Trainers Association say people haven't been given enough time to comply with the new law.
Britain's 400 registered motorcycle training schools have been swamped with calls from car owners trying to complete a day-long compulsory basic training course before next week's deadline. Most riders have used their bikes for years. Now they must pay £65 and prove they're competent.
I wouldn't mind so much if we'd been given a 6 months notice or something like that. But to get this letter last Friday to say, unless I pass my test in the next couple of weeks, including Christmas, I think it's outrageous.
The new rules affect light motorcycles with engines bigger than 50cc up to 125cc, ridden on L plates by people who've held full car licenses longer than 6 years. The course includes a 2-hour road test, and from Wednesday anyone who hasn't taken it won't be insured against accidents or theft. The DSA doesn't know how many riders are affected, but admits tens of thousands use their bikes daily. It says the delay in posting reminders was unfortunate.
Probably what we've done now we should have done much earlier, but a lot of people are just not interested in learning to ride a motorcycle properly. They'll just use their car licence forever. So there's always going to be that cut-off date where it's going to affect people come what may.
The Trainers Association wants the new regulations postponed until the muddle can be sorted out. The DSA says that's impossible without parliamentary approval. Christopher Wayne, BBC News.
Zimbabwe's cricketers are in a strong position after 2 days of the second and final test in Harare. England were bowled out for 156 in their first innings, and Zimbabwe had reached 93 for 2 in reply when rain stopped play.
England's miserable performance on the first day had been no laughing matter, but perhaps there was some small crumb of comfort to be gained as John Crawley and Philip Tufnell edged the total past 150 this morning. But when Tufnell was somewhat unfortunately bowled off his body by Heath Streak, England's score of 156 still seemed woefully inadequate. The start of Zimbabwe's reply offered some encouragement to England when Mark Decker was caught behind off Alan Mullally with a score on just 5. But the Zimbabwean captain Alistair Campbell joined Grant Flower, and the second wicket pair began to put England's total in perspective. But boundaries like this were rare. Only 17 runs came in 2 hours between lunch and tea, and the persistence of the England bowlers was rewarded when Craig White claimed the wicket of Campbell with the score on 46. But Zimbabwe weren't about to bat as badly as England had done, and their vastly experienced coach David Houghton coped with the desperately slow outfield by taking the aerial route to the boundary. At the other end, Grant Flower survived 2 confident English appeals, the second for a catch off Robert Croft, but this once again was Zimbabwe's day. They trailed by only 63 runs, and in these conditions, even a modest first innings lead might well be decisive. Rain prevented all but 4 balls after tea today. England might well need more help from the weather to avoid a humiliating defeat in this test and series. Duncan Jones, BBC News.
And that's all for now. The main news is at 9 o'clock.
Good evening to you. The real white Christmas came a couple of days too late as far as most parts of the country are concerned, and it's going to stay cold in the next few days. In fact, as far as the south goes, it's probably going to get even colder because these raw, strong easterly winds are going to be picking up, and there could well be some more snow coming along towards the new year as well. Now, during this evening and tonight, we're going to find the clouds spreading back again. It's still lurking across East Anglia and the extreme southeast. It's going to be heading westwards for a while. It will bring with it a little bit of sort of light rain or a flake or two of snow as it heads westwards. But more than anything, although the temperatures at the moment are dipping down below freezing with the clear skies, as the cloud comes across, so temperatures rising above freezing for a while, and then across East Anglia and the southeast, clearing skies push the temperatures back down again. So all in all, many parts of the country at some time or other are going to have a frost tonight, so watch out for those icy patches on the roads. Although around the coast, temperatures should hold above freezing. The southern part of the country tomorrow starting off cloudy, just here and there perhaps a spot or two of light rain, sleet or flake of snow, but nothing really very much at all, and it'll be dying out. The cloud will be breaking up in any case, so that for much of the day, for much of the country, it's going to be dry with some weak winter sunshine, best of the sunshine probably in the northwest. The odd lightish shower still coming on to those eastern coasts. More than anything tomorrow, you're going to notice that wind back again, especially across the south of the country. Quite a strong east to northeast wind, so it will make it feel raw. In fact, the temperatures may well go down a little bit across the southeastern corner late on in the day, and at best only around about 3 degrees and staying below freezing over the highlands. And then looking at Sunday, we're going to find, for many parts, starting off fine and frosty. Already some wintry showers along the east coast. And I think they're going to be spreading westwards during the course of the day. And it's going to be pretty cold again with that bitter wind. And again, eastern areas, some wintry weather into Monday.